Hey, welcome to a new episode of Last Call Baseball, number 165. I'm Dorian. Have you ever been stuck in the car on the highway or at the airport, delayed flight, or if you're on a ship, it delays your trip, you get annoyed, whether it's for fun, whether it's a business trip, whether you're going to a baseball game? Have you heard of the NASA and Boeing saga? We have two American astronauts up in the International Space Station, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore. They went on a business trip back on June 4th, I believe, June 4th or June 5th. They went to the International Space Station for a business trip, these two astronauts. They were supposed to be there for a week and come back to planet Earth. But Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore can't come back because the Boeing Starliner that they made it up to space apparently has faulty thrusters and several reports of helium leaks, which is very, very dangerous. If this was like the mid 1990s or earlier, this would be so much bigger news. We have two human beings stuck in space. They're supposed to be there for a week. Oh, and by the way, Sunita and Butch are now stuck up there until February 2025. Exactly how much do you pack when you go on a week trip, whether it's a business trip or, like I said, for vacation? Are you packing enough underwear? Are you packing enough deodorant? I don't think that you can just adjust from a week trip to an 8-month trip. I'm laughing at the absurdity of this. This is such a huge deal, but we're inundated with information, inundated with sports games, inundated with the civil war in Sudan, the barbaric Russian invasion of the Ukraine, elections that were held in the UK last month in July, the elections in the US in 2 months. Two human beings are stuck in space. It blows my mind. This is not as bad as the whole Apollo 13. Apollo 13, obviously, the incident was turned into a film where 3 American astronauts almost died in space. But here's what I found peculiar. The Boeing Starliner spacecraft is coming back from the International Space Station on Friday, September 6th, without, obviously, Sunita and Butch. This son of a gun spacecraft is like self-driving. And here back on planet Earth, we're still dealing with knuckleheads on the road that make us late to baseball games and to work. And nothing is going according to plan for freaking Boeing. And for the Pittsburgh Pirates, nothing is going according to plan either. The Pirates bullpen is delaying their return to the playoffs until at least next year. A few days ago on Wednesday, August 28th, the Pirates were playing at home against the Chicago Cubs. They lost 14-10. Sometimes you just lose high-scoring games. But wait, I watched that game because I watch every single Paul Skeens start. He didn't pitch particularly well because this is like the third or fourth time this year, and Skeens is a rookie, that he's pitched against the Cubs. The Cubs have now seen him all the time. I think he gave up 3 runs in 5 innings. Pirates, going into the 7th inning, the Pirates were up 10-4. Going into the 7th inning, that means your bullpen just needs to get you 9 outs. You have a 6-run cushion. Here we go again. The bullpen wasted another Paul Skeens start. This reminds me at the beginning of the year, close to the beginning of the year when Paul Skeens debuted, where he pitched well for 6 innings, and then the bullpen would come and just poo-poo the bed. They got rid of some of those guys. They fortified the bullpen somewhat, and now it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. This month alone, while these two astronauts have been in space, the Pirates have had a 10-game losing streak at the beginning of August, and now they've lost 4 straight games, 5 of their last 6 games. This 2024 regular season business trip for the Pirates is going to end a lot sooner than the unfortunate 2 Americans we have in space, Sunita and Butch, because by the time Sunita and Butch comes back in February, the Pirates season obviously is going to be over, and the Pirates are already going to be back in spring training. So hope springs eternal. Hope to get Sunita and Butch back to planet Earth. They're going to miss Thanksgiving, Christmas, Veterans Day, Eid, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and whatever you celebrate. They're going to miss all of it. It just blows my mind. Hey guys, I'm going to come back in a week. I'm going to go to space. Super cool. I'll be back in a week. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be gone for 8 months. That's insane. Speaking of science, our next guest knows a lot about physics. I'm happy to be joined by Dr. Alan Nathan. Professor Emeritus in Physics at the University of Illinois Urbana, Champaign. Dr. Nathan, welcome to Last Call Baseball.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
You know, in baseball, I think that everything revolves around the pitcher because the pitcher has the ball in his hand, his habits, his timing, and you also love passion for World War One. What World War One general is your pick to start Game 7 of the World Series, and why?
Interesting question. There weren't too many really good World War One generals. I'll go with Pershing since he was sort of on our side. But my interest in World War One is not so much the battles itself. My interest is how it all began, number one, and then how it all ended, number two. The lead up to the war, what all transpired that led to war, what mistakes were made, how could the war have been avoided had people acted in a different manner, and then what happened at the end, the Treaty of Versailles, and how that sort of sets the stage for much of what happened in the 20th century.
You know, I'm going to answer my own question. I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to go with General Ludendorff, the absolutely insane quartermaster of the Prussian army, because you know better than I do. He overprepared. I mean, he got himself into the nitty-gritty details. If I want someone running a war, I don't want him to do it. But if I need someone to win me one game, that General Ludendorff is going to be prepared. I mean, the man worked like 18 hours a day, which is insane during wartime.
Okay. You've clearly thought much more about this than I have, so I'll go with your answer. Good question, though. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it.
You brought up the precursor to the war, to the Great War.
Yeah.
One book I have always meant to read is The Guns of August.
Yeah, that was the second book I read, and it was the second best book I read. The first book I read, I've actually read a dozen or so books, mostly on the lead up to the war. The first book I read was far and away the best. It's called The Sleepwalkers. And it basically ends with the assassination of the Archduke, which is sort of what, it doesn't. No, it ends with the outbreak of the war. But you have to go a long way through it before they have the assassination, which then 37 days later led to the outbreak of war. But the author of this book, I've heard him speak on YouTube videos quite a few times about this, Christopher Clark, and he's got a unique point of view about it. And I really, really learned an awful lot by reading that book. And none of the other books I've read since then can touch that. Although the Tuckman book on The Guns of August is truly superb.
I'm going to put the Sleepwalkers, as you said, I'm going to put that on my library wish list or whatever, because
it's a long book, and you know, it begins with what's going on in Serbia, and then who knows anything about Serbia, right? So
that's exciting. Yeah, because that's one of the reasons why I haven't read Guns of August, because I think it's like 700 pages, and I'm like, it's going to take me a summer to do it, but I'm going to.
But The Guns of August is actually it's so well written that it's quite manageable. Really, she has a very great writing style, and although she's not a professional historian, but she wrote about history better than most people do. Most professional historians do.
Yeah, this isn't a book review podcast, but it's becoming one, which I enjoy. And my last point about history and being written, I don't know if you ever had the pleasure of reading any of William Manchester's books. He wrote on the Krupp family. He wrote by the assassination of President Kennedy. He wrote a book on Churchill. He blows me away.
No, I haven't. The one that I'm most aware of was the Kennedy assassination, but I've never read that book or any of the others.
Yeah, the Krupp one is amazing. I think you would probably enjoy it's called The Arms of Krupp, which is basically the family of Krupp, who Krupp, the family that were the steel magnet, the armaments of the Prussian Empire, and then Weimar Republic, and then Nazi Germany. They were building basically armaments for proto Germany for 300 years, and obviously World War One is a big thing. And he gets across the personality of Kaiser Wilhelm the second, right? Kaiser Wilhelm II, of how he was just an unpleasant person and not very serious man. But anyways, I digress. It's a great book, Arms Krupp.
Before we leave the topic, I can also recommend a very good movie for you to watch. It's called 37 Days. And it's a dramatization of the 37 days between the assassination and the outbreak of war, mostly from the British point of view. So it's all actors and everything, but it's actually very, very good. And it really is pretty, well, it is from the British point of view. So the British are probably treated very well here, but still it's pretty informative.
I mean, I could spend the next 30 minutes with you talking about World War One and obviously the Eastern Campaign. And Lawrence, I actually just finished the Seven Pillars by T.E. Lawrence, and when his campaign out in the Levant. But anyways, back in the U.S., they were still playing World War One. During World War One, they were still playing baseball, and that was the time of the great Chicago White Sox. They were, the scandal had yet to come, but they were still they were having a great dynasty. Settling back into baseball, where does your love of Boston Red Sox come from?
Okay, so I'm a New Englander by birth. I was born in a small town in Maine, and during that era, so I mostly grew up in the mid 50s to mid 60s or so in that area, that region, that time frame. And if you lived in New England during that period, you were either a Red Sox fan or a Yankee fan. That all changed later. That now they're all Red Sox fans. But back then they were almost even equally divided between Red Sox and Yankee fans. So I just naturally became a Red Sox fan and have stuck with it ever since. Even though I'm at the boundary between the Cubs and the Cardinals. The White Sox, no one much cares about, especially this year. But around here, people are more or less equally divided between the Cubs and the Cardinals. We're almost equidistant between them.
I love that. I'm an Atlanta Braves fan, and I'm really interested. I love the history of the Braves because they're probably the oldest continuous baseball club, and I know that they were in Boston for I think 70 plus years. And one of the reasons why that they left was because they air quote lost the popularity contest in the Boston area because to obviously the Red Sox.
Right. Yeah. They left. I think it was in 1954, and they went to Milwaukee, and then from Milwaukee to Atlanta. I forget the exact.
It was 65, and so they started at Atlanta in the 1966 season.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I think I even came across your name is because you're obviously I mentioned you studied physics, you got your doctorate, you've been an esteemed professional professor in that field.
Yeah.
I am more of an astrophysics enthusiast. By no means do I have any idea what any of the calculations or anything. And when I was reading up, I noticed that you have or still work with an accelerator with the Thomas Jefferson National Accelerator Facility. Can you explain to us what an accelerator is?
Okay, so just to let you know, I haven't done this now for almost 15 years, but I had a whole career of doing nuclear physics research using particle accelerators. So an accelerator is the most commonly known one is the cyclotron, which is invented by E.O. Lawrence, that accelerated protons in a circular orbit, and then you extract the beam. And the basic idea is you want to accelerate subatomic particles, typically protons, which are positively charged, or electrons, and sometimes heavier things, so-called heavy ions, and you collide them with some target, and then you induce reactions, and then you have detectors that are surrounding the target looking at the various products that come off as a result, and then there's a lot of effort goes into interpreting what you're finding. So the whole idea is to learn about the structure of nuclei or of nucleons. Nucleons are the protons and neutrons that make up the nuclei, and learning about their internal structure. And so I spent a whole career doing that. I did that for quite a number of years, but I haven't done it recently.
I was surprised that when I came across, like you said, the Thomas Jefferson, the National Accelerator Facility, because the only accelerator I had ever heard of was CERN over in Geneva, Switzerland, and that only came about because it was in current events, basically. I think like 15 years ago, because people in certain sections of science were afraid that the accelerator over at CERN, they were trying to duplicate a black hole and we're all going to die.
Yeah,
And
so the CERN accelerator is sort of the world's highest energy accelerator, and it's a collider. It actually creates two counter orbiting beams that collide with each other, and you're looking at again, you have these much more complicated detectors than I used that are looking at the various products and trying to infer things from what they see. The accelerator, Thomas Jefferson Lab, but they just simply call it Jefferson Lab or J Lab. At J Lab, where I spent a few years doing experiments, they accelerate electrons, which are different, but nevertheless, the basic idea is the same. You have electrons hitting some target. So I did an experiment where I had electrons essentially colliding with a liquid hydrogen target, and looking at the scattering and trying to infer something about the structure of the proton from what we observe from the scattering.
what I find fascinating is, as you had said, not just yourself, but I'm sure dozens and hundreds of colleagues have made strides in this field and have made careers out of something that, for lack of a better phrase, like a lot of layman people have absolutely no idea. And like, I read some of this stuff and I'm like, what is the point of trying to pull apart a quark or trying to understand what's inside? And you've also become famous in baseball, not just because of obviously you love the Boston Red Sox, but you've been able to apply, I don't know about applying, but somehow you've been able to use your skills and the technical skills in studying baseball. And I'm like, what is the baseball equivalent of an accelerator?
Yeah, well, so the collision between this electron and this hydrogen atom, which is essentially a proton, is sort of similar to the collision between a baseball and a bat. Certain principles are involved: conservation of energy, conservation of momentum, conservation of angular momentum, things like that. Of course, they're really, aside from those general principles, they're really quite different. But they're collision experiments. So you could argue one collision experiment is just like any other collision experiment, and to lowest order, I guess that's really true. But so my natural interest in collisions of subatomic particles played a role in my getting interested in the physics of baseball, because the very first thing I did once I got interested in it was try to develop a computational model for what happens when the ball meets the bat.
I'm trying to remember how long ago it was. I think it was maybe like the 2019 playoffs, where I think it was ESPN2 had a dual broadcast ship. It was some in the playoffs. On the normal ESPN, they would just have the normal announcers, and then on ESPN2 they had the sabermetrics people on it, and everything
thing, right?
Right. Like, how do you would you enjoy something like that versus just the normal broadcast?
Oh yeah. Well, it depends. It depends on what I'm watching. Okay. If I'm watching a Red Sox game, I am so heavily involved with the game, I don't want to hear all these guys talking. All right. So I'm very focused on the game. But if I'm just watching a game for my own enjoyment, which I do, and especially during the World Series and during the postseason, yeah, those kinds of broadcasts are just really a lot of fun to listen to, because I've been involved in a lot of that kind of analysis myself. Talking about things that they talk about that was not even part of the vocabulary, 10 years ago, like exit velocities and launch angles and spin axis and, all manner of things.
I think baseball has always been at the forefront when it comes to sports with metrics, stats. It's incredible that they've been so far ahead of anything else. Like they're trying. I think in like soccer, they've just recently, in the past 5-10 years, tried to add things like calculate things like expected goals, just like expected batting average in baseball. And football and basketball seems so, it's even, I think it's further behind. I don't know if you enjoy other sports besides baseball, but as you were talking, I'm thinking, how in the world would you be able to apply those types of studies and theories to basketball? Because it has a ball, it spins. If a ball is kind of like a knuckleball, it goes through the air, will it help go through the net? Like, I'm thinking about like Stephen Curry. Obviously, the Olympics just finished a few weeks ago. Have you ever been approached or know of other people who are working with other leagues besides baseball? Because baseball, I feel, is like just saturated with good, really good brains when it comes to trying to understand how to win.
I don't know. So basketball is interesting. I am not. I haven't been involved with analytics in anything other than baseball. But in basketball, you can see the effect of it. I mean, the game of basketball today is very, very different than what it was 15 years ago. There is such a strong emphasis on shooting three-pointers. The role of a big man is quite diminished compared with what it used to be, way back, say, in the 80s, for example, or even, and especially even earlier. And it's all a result of analytics. I mean, the idea is if you can get an open three-pointer, take it, because I mean, if you're a halfway decent shooter, because the odds are with you. I mean, and Steph Curry shows that. I mean, of course, he's unusual in that regard, but I mean that has led to a whole new, almost a revolution. The other thing is that with the technology nowadays, they do this in baseball, but they're also doing it in basketball. Where the players are on the court, how they're spaced, and how they set up picks and things like that. That's all looked at very, very carefully, and I think it plays a big role. Now, you may not appreciate it in the course of watching a game, but these are things that are really well understood. If you listen to players talk, which I've done a little bit on TV and things, about how a certain play was set up, I mean, there's a lot to it. A lot of spacing and movement play a big role, and I think a lot of it has to do, just like with baseball, a lot of the analytic revolution, if you like, in baseball has gone right along with the development of technologies that allow you to measure, to track the flight of a baseball, whether it's a pitch ball or a batted ball or a thrown ball, to track the players on the field. And nowadays they're tracking the motion of the pitcher, the motion of the batter, the motion of the bat. I mean, this is all incredible amount of information. And it sort of reached the point that if you're not using that, if you don't have people in your front office that are looking at that information and trying to make sense of it and trying to gain some advantage from it, then you're falling behind. Really is true.
Yeah, you had mentioned the White Sox, and from what we read just in the public domain, I believe that people say that the Chicago White Sox have almost like a non-existent analytical department.
Yeah, that is sad but true. I actually, a few years ago, I'm trying to remember when this was, I was in the Phoenix area sometime in the middle of I think it was a conference. Somebody I know in the White Sox organization, I had an afternoon to kill, and he invited me out to the ballpark where they were doing spring training, and I met a bunch of people. And a couple of people I met, and that was their analytics department, these two people that I met. And, that is way on the low side. If I were to do the same thing with Houston, for example, or the Cubs, I've met with the Cubs analytics team, and it was a whole room full of people. Teams that have been late to latch onto this, it sort of shows, right?
Going back to the basketball analogy, I found it interesting as you were speaking. I was thinking the big man of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the center in basketball was like the bonding element of basketball. And now that's just been dispersed. And one of the men that was pushing towards that to just shoot more 3-points is a New England native, Rick Pitino, when he was coaching the Providence, the Friars, I think, right?
Yeah,
Providence University. Yeah. And now obviously he's done a lot, gone to other places, but
he almost ruined the Celtics, but all right, that's another story.
That's right. I forgot he left Kentucky. That's right.
He left Kentucky to become both coach and GM of the Celtics.
Yeah. There's very, very few people that can do both. You're either good at one or the other, or
right.
More often than not good at any. But that's nothing to do with Rick Pitino. But speaking of Boston, back to the Boston Red Sox. What are your thoughts of not just this season, but of the past few seasons? I feel that as if like John Henry or whoever, I mean, he's technically still the owner, but I'm like, I feel like this very important franchise has almost gorged itself over the first 15, 18 years and winning, I believe 4 World Series. And now it's like John Henry's eyes have been cast somewhere else. And like, I'm thinking the Red Sox, I mean, the American League East, you basically just have now the Yankees and the Orioles because the Toronto Blue Jays experiment has just gone completely sideways. As a baseball fan, I find that very disappointing because I was so ready to like enjoy Blue Jays baseball. But what are your thoughts overall about where the Red Sox are as an organization?
Well, I think that they have, to some extent, turned the corner in that they actually have a really good hitting team this year. They are very weak on pitching, especially in the bullpen, and they have their fielding leaves something to be desired also. But Dave Dombrowski was the GM or whatever the title was, president of baseball operations or whatever the title is, but essentially the GM. He's now with the Phillies. He was quite bold, I think. He was absolutely not afraid to make big trades, to make big free agent signings, and pay big salaries. He won, as a result of all that, they won the 2018 World Series, but really haven't played terribly well much since then. And he got fired. I think John Henry, well, it is true. So John Henry's the principal owner. He's the guy with all the big bucks. He bought the Red Sox back in 2002 and put a lot of money into the team, put a lot of money into renovating the stadium, Fenway Park. But somewhere along the line, he expanded. So he has this soccer team in Liverpool and other things. I mean, he owns a hockey team now. I don't remember which one. Is it Pittsburgh Penguins? Or I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's it. It is the Penguins.
Anyway, he's spread things around a little bit. And, he seems to be less willing than he used to be in pumping a lot of money into free agents. So back when Theo Epstein was the GM of the Red Sox, Epstein was really, really good at knowing how to balance short-term interests with long-term interests. So, if you pump all your resources into, free agents, eventually you're stuck with all those salaries. So you've got to look years ahead to ask yourself, what's this team going to look like 2-3 years from now, instead of just playing for 1 year. The difficulty in Boston is that, since the Red Sox became good, the fans will not settle for, if you were to call it a rebuilding year, they wouldn't settle for that at all. The Cub fans were very, very patient with their rebuilding. Houston Astros went through a 4 or 5 year rebuilding period where they were losing 100 games a year. The Red Sox fans won't put up with that. But now I think that they've turned the corner to some extent. They've got a lot of good young players that are currently on the Major League club. They've got 3 really good prospects that are right now in AAA they won't make the Major League club this season, but probably in spring training next year they'll be part of the club. And these are all position players. Where they're hurting is pitching. So they're gonna. I think if they expect to improve significantly next year, they're going to have to do something during the off season on obtaining better pitching.
I'm going to push back on the thing of Red Sox fans aren't patient. Red Sox fans shouldn't be patient because there's probably, you can count on one hand the franchises that just print money in no particular order. The New York Yankees, the LA Dodgers, the Cubs, and the Red Sox. It's like, if it's not being pumped back into the farm system, international signings of 14-year-old Dominican kids or free agents, where is that money going to? Because this isn't Houston. Houston is, they've had tremendous success thanks to, bottoming out 10 years ago, and then their analytics and a little bit of cheating. This isn't Minnesota Twins. This is the Boston Red Sox fans in Japan, the US. So as a baseball fan, I'm like, that's why I'm disappointed in John Henry. It's like, this was your baby for 15 years. And now it's like, well, I have a diverse portfolio of franchises. Like, where is that money going to? That's my rhetorical question.
Yeah, no, I don't have a ready answer for that, but it's clear that he has decided to spread his wealth around the various franchise, professional sport franchises that he owns. So
Yeah, but again, I have my favorite teams, but as overall, I'm always a fan of baseball. But as fans of baseball, let's stick with with Boston Red Sox. Let's say Mr.
okay,
Henry goes to you and says, Dr. Nathan, I want you to be the next general manager. Just like that scene in what was it? In Moneyball. I want you to be the next
right.
general manager of the Boston Red Sox. You are now the general manager of the Boston Red Sox. What's one or two things you do with your powers? And remember, you can do anything you want. You can change the time of game, the ticket prices, anything you want.
Yeah, like that's a hard question. I mean, I wouldn't have let things go as badly as they've gone. Like I say, the pitching is just atrocious. I mean, they've got some good young pitchers, but I think you really every major league staff needs an ace, somebody that they can count on. If you're in a losing streak, you put this guy out there and going to at least win one. And the Red Sox really have no identifiable ace. They've got a bunch of number twos and threes and fours.
Well, Boston's ace is doing really great down in Atlanta. By
Yeah,
the way, I never ever thought Chris Sale was going to do anything this year. This has been a huge
nor
surprise.
did I, and nor did the Red Sox. I mean, it was all very iffy. Look, ever since the 2018 season when they won the World Series, he's had one injury after another. And I think that they decided that he couldn't be relied on. And so let's get something for him while we can. And look what happened, right? And the guy that got for him has been injured most of the year. So, yeah. So the Red Sox have had a little bit of bad luck with injuries. It's easy for someone like me to say, just spend some money. Of course, it's not my money, right? Red Sox fans certainly have been very tolerant of high prices on tickets. I mean, they went through, the first 10, the first dozen years or so of this century, basically filling up Fenway Park every single game. Every single game, they were sellouts. And the standing joke was, if you want to see a Red Sox game, fly to Baltimore and watch them when they're in ball, or fly to Tampa Bay. And so, if you went to those ballparks during that period, there would be a tremendous number of Red Sox fans there. It's easy for me to say, just spend money, but that's what I would do, is spend money.
And the money's there, but the big boss doesn't want to spend it.
Yeah, that's my viewpoint. But look, I am most definitely no expert on the business of baseball. My expertise lies elsewhere. So again, as a fan, it's very easy for me to just make that recommendation. But how realistic it is, I don't know.
You were mentioning the pitching injuries, and I've been really, really surprised that this season, not that this is not new, I've just come across it, that every single team has had tremendous injury issues. Look at the LA Dodgers. They have almost all stars on their injured list. The Arizona Diamondbacks, they're just getting everyone back. And that's one of the reasons why the Diamondbacks are in, like, I think the leading wild card team and only like 3 games behind the Dodgers.
Yeah, they have the best record since the All-Star break, I think.
Yeah, the Braves lost Spencer Strider, and he pitched, I think, like 6 innings this year. Everyone's up in arms about what do we do about these arm injuries. Is like, have we ever found any type of correlation between the amount of time these men are pitching or the type of pitches that they're throwing? Think about spin rate, because I'm thinking the harder spin rate, an increase in the spin rates would then make more force to actually create that spin.
Yeah, well, look, so you're getting into another area where I'm not particularly an expert, but the biomechanics of pitching. But nowadays, most major league clubs have people in their analytics department who are devoted to studying the analytics of pitching, the motion. So there's a lot of data available now, motion analysis data, where they really are analyzing the motion of pitches. And I think a lot of it is part of the reason is to improve the pitching, but a lot of it is to prevent injuries. I mean, my simple way of looking at it is, look, you're most pitchers are, at least with their four-seam fastball, they're trying to throw it as hard as possible, and that's bound to lead to injuries. I mean, if you just look at the progression of fastball speeds, back 20 years ago, if you were in the low 90s, that was pretty good. And now, you've got to be in the high 90s to be considered pretty good. And and it used to be pretty unusual to break 100. And that seems to be pretty routine these days.
Yeah, that was stop the presses sort of deal. If you had a reliever coming in like the 90s that threw 100 or even touched flirting with 100. But
now in terms of, trying to put spin on the ball and, how that affects your arm, I have to admit, I don't really know much about it. But there are people who do, and people who are studying these things. And I think, as I said, most major league clubs have somebody on their staff, at least one person, who's sort of a biomechanics expert.
I'll have to look into that. When we go to watch potentially a college baseball game of the University of Illinois.
Well, so Illinois is in the Big Ten, and they have had from one year to another, by and large, a pretty successful program. They have never made it to the College World Series in my time here, although they've come close. They won the regular season Big Ten this past year, but then in the Big Ten tournament at the end of the season, they lost early, so they never made it to the postseason, to the regionals. So there's good baseball to be watched, and I've developed a little bit of a relationship with the team. So I've had undergraduate students who that I've connected up with the team to do analytics. One of my big success stories is a guy by the name of Charlie Young, who was an undergraduate that worked with me for 3 of his 4 years at U of I. And he set up basically all the analytics platform that we have for the U of I baseball team. And he's currently working in the front office of the Houston Astros. So he's done very well for himself. And he's highly sought after. He'll do very, very, he'll be a career baseball guy. So yeah, there's good baseball to see in Champaign, Urbana.
I love asking this question because I love traveling for baseball. When we go watch some college baseball is it Fighting Illini, right? The University of Illinois. Yeah. When we go watch a Fighting Illini game I think they start in February, March. When we go, what's some places that you would recommend of your favorite local places? It doesn't have to be the fanciest place in the world, but just a place you love enjoying, getting coffee, some food in the Champaign area.
Okay, so coffee, there's several places called Espresso Royale where they have really good coffee, and that's my coffee place. For lunch, I like to go to this place, one of two places, a pizza place. It's called Papa Del's. It's just a local place where they have both Chicago-style so-called deep dish pizza as well as thin crust pizza, and it is the best pizza I've ever had. Another lunch place I like to go to is Harvest Market. It's actually a supermarket, but they have this food court kind of thing there, which is a really good place to go for lunch. And for dinner, I don't go out to expensive places for dinner. More likely than not, I go to this place about 10 miles south of us in a little town of Philo. It's called the Philo Tavern. So it's sort of a bar and small restaurant kind of thing, and sort of a down home kind of place. I like to go there.
I love going to Chicago with a caveat in the summer. You are a much braver man than I. Well, you're from Maine, so I'm sure the winters in Illinois aren't too bad. But I haven't been out of Champaign yet. But how far is that outside of Chicago?
It's about 120, 130 miles south.
Like a couple hours drive.
South. Yeah, depending on traffic, right. 2 to 2.5 hours drive.
Okay.
So, just to give you an idea, I can get to whatever that Guaranteed Rate Park where the White Sox play. I can get there in just about 2 hours, but that's on the south side. To get to where the Cubs play on the north side probably takes you another 45 minutes.
Yeah. I've been to a game at Guaranteed Rate Field. Every time I go to Chicago, the White Sox are always in town. And the Cubs are always away, so I have yet to go to Wrigley Field.
I don't much care for Guaranteed Rate Field, but I do like Wrigley Field a lot. It's a fun place to go to.
Definitely have to try that, and then drive 2.5 hours out to catch a fighting Illini
Right.
game.
There you go.
All right, sir.
So
Thank you.
when you're in town, let me know and we'll go out for coffee or pizza or something.
Absolutely. I would love that. Seriously. I love that. And I could actually pick your brain more about physics because I love learning about that stuff. YouTube and all that stuff. I know as much about it as probably a dog does, but it still interests me. All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Let us know where we can read any of your works or follow you on social media.
I have a website. It's baseball.physics.illinois.edu. And there are lots of links there to things that I've done, things that other people have done. There's a tremendous amount of information there. You could follow me on X or Twitter at POBGUY, POBGUY, like POB is like physics of baseball, POB guy. So I post there mostly about baseball, sometimes about politics, sometimes about Ted Williams because his birthday was today, and that sort of thing.
I want to thank Dr. Nathan for joining us this week. I wish I had a drink to celebrate space or quarks, protons, but all I have in my hand, but actually most of it is in my belly now, is a rum, is an Appleton Estate 8-year-old reserve from Appleton Estate in St. Elizabeth, Jamaica. It's delicious. I mix it with Coca-Cola, not because I have a preference for Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whatever's at hand, anything that has a cola. I love rum. This is nice and smooth. It's a great drink to have when you're winding down the night. Perfect. Good nightcap. As you're winding down the night, feel free to open your phone. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Last Call Baseball. We have t-shirts for sale. And also, we're putting up old interviews on YouTube, our YouTube channel, Last Call Baseball. Same audio, but pictures so you actually can see what we're talking about. And subscribe if you want. But I definitely want to thank you for listening to Last Call Baseball. Be great and get home safe.